A judgment from the High Court in London has found that the ruler of Dubai, Sheikh Mohammed Al Maktoum, secretly hacked the phones of his ex-wife, Princess Haya of Jordan. He denies any involvement. The World Health Organization has approved a vaccine for malaria following clinical trials. Scientists say the vaccine could save the lives of hundreds of thousands of children in Africa. Survivors of the Islamist attack on the Bataclan concert venue in Paris nearly 6 years ago have been recounting their ordeal in court for the first time. Some told how they pretended to be dead. And the BBC has found evidence of the Taliban carrying out systematic evictions of Hazara people in Afghanistan. More than 1,000 families were targeted. The Taliban claims the mainly Shia Hazaras were living there illegally.
The Nobel Prize in Chemistry is awarded to scientists Benjamin List and David Macmillan for developing a tool to build molecules. In Hong Kong, Chief Executive Carrie Lam defends a disputed national security law and changes to election processes during her yearly policy speech. She also promises new spending for development. In Slovenia, European Union leaders say they support Albania, Bosnia, Kosovo, Montenegro, North Macedonia, and Serbia joining the EU one day. And in the Philippines, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., son of the ousted former president, officially seeks the presidency.
This year's Nobel Prize in Chemistry honors a pair of chemists who developed a new and innovative way to build molecules. Their work is used to create new medicines and make chemistry greener.
The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences has today decided to award the 2021 Nobel Prize in Chemistry jointly to Benjamin List and David Macmillan for the development of asymmetric organocatalysis.
List and Macmillan independently developed an entirely new type of catalysis. The committee chair called their work so simple and ingenious that many wonder why no one thought of it before. Organic catalysts are cheap and environmentally friendly. Researchers who had relied on rare plants and organisms can now create large volumes of curative substances using this molecule building method. The prize committee says it allows scientists to construct anything from new pharmaceuticals to molecules that can capture light in solar cells. List and Macmillan both still work in this field. List at Germany's Max Planck Institute for Coal Research and Macmillan at Princeton University in the United States. Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam has expressed her intention to pass security legislation that's long met strong public opposition. Lam outlined policies for the year ahead in an address Wednesday to the Legislative Council. The Hong Kong government submitted the security bill to the council in 2003, but it was withdrawn after a protest rally drew 500,000 participants. The government has since restricted anti-government protests and changed election systems. Pro-Beijing forces are now almost certain to secure a majority in the Legislative Council election scheduled for December. The Hong Kong government is believed to be aiming to enact the security law by next June, when Lam's current term expires. The legislation is expected to include measures banning sedition, subversion, and theft of state secrets. Its implementation could lead to a harsher crackdown on opposition to the government. Turning now to the Taiwan Strait, where tensions are building. Taiwan's defense chief is warning China will be capable of launching a full-scale invasion of the island by the year 2025. Beijing has already sent 150 military aircraft this month into Taiwan's air defense identification zone.
It is the toughest situation I have seen in more than 40 years of my military life.
The defense minister said by 2025, China would be able to keep the cost of a conflict at a minimum. He said this means Beijing would be fully prepared to start a war. Taiwanese officials say China has been steadily deploying nuclear submarines and missile destroyers. In response, Taiwan's parliament is weighing an $8.6 billion spending bill that includes building long-range missiles and warships. Now, a former U.S. National Security Advisor is sounding the alarm over China's recent movements. H.R. McMaster calls it a very dangerous time. The former advisor to then-President Donald Trump spoke to reporters at a roundtable in Washington. The retired Army general says China's Communist Party is facing a more resilient Taiwan. He says President Tsai Ing-wen's party is resisting Beijing and taking strong defensive actions. McMaster believes the world must follow the situation closely, especially after next year's Beijing Olympics. He says the U.S., Japan, Australia, and other regional allies must send a message to the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party and the People's Liberation Army. McMaster says they must be convinced their objectives cannot be reached through force or coercion. He suggests the countries step up their ability to block military threats. Myanmar's envoy to the UN says he's working to end the military crackdown in his country that's left more than 1,100 people dead.
It is not in line with the international human rights law. There is really serious violations of human rights they are committing.
Cho Mo-tun spoke to NHK in an exclusive interview. He said the revolt of pro-democracy forces last month is a defensive war against the military. He added the people in Myanmar must unite.
We need to strengthen our cooperation among ourselves to fight against the military. So at the same time, we really look forward to the support from the international community. So let's work together to end this military in the near future.
Myanmar's military seized power in February's coup and appointed its own envoy to the UN. But Cho Mo-tun is still seen as representing Myanmar because the UN Credentials Committee has yet to decide on the country's representation. The ambassador is set to make a speech shortly at a General Assembly panel. Next, Malaysia has summoned China's ambassador in Kuala Lumpur to protest Beijing's maritime activities in its waters in the South China Sea. Malaysian Foreign Ministry officials say the protest was against the presence of Chinese vessels in its exclusive economic zone near Borneo. They say Malaysia's position is based on international law. Chinese survey ships were seen late last month in Malaysia's exclusive economic zone, but the officials did not say if the protest was related to that case. Malaysia also summoned the Chinese ambassador in June after 16 Chinese military planes were detected over its maritime zone. The incident prompted Malaysia to scramble fighter jets. Beijing claims jurisdiction over most of the South China Sea. Its increasing presence has become a source of contention and vigilance with other countries that have competing claims in the disputed waters. And now to the Philippines, where the son of former dictator Ferdinand Marcos has entered next May's presidential race. Ferdinand Marcos Jr. is the latest candidate to announce his intention to succeed incumbent Rodrigo Duterte.
We unify now in the face of the COVID crisis, in the face of the economic crisis. That is what I am talking about when I say a unifying leadership.
The 64-year-old former senator filed his certificate of candidacy on Wednesday. His father, a strongman president, was ousted in 1986 and died in exile in Hawaii 3 years later. Duterte's father briefly served in the first Marcos administration in the 1960s. Duterte is believed to have friendly ties with the Marcos family. On Saturday, Duterte announced he had decided to retire from politics. His eldest daughter, Sara Duterte, is seen as a possible presidential candidate. She is currently mayor of the southern city of Davao. Now, already in the race is boxing legend Manny Pacquiao. Pacquiao has accused the government of mismanaging its response to the COVID-19 outbreak. Another prominent candidate is Manila Mayor Francisco Domagoso, who's better known by his stage name Isko Moreno. The registration deadline is Friday. Japan's Prime Minister Kishida Fumio has spoken with relatives of Japanese nationals abducted decades ago by North Korea. He told them the repatriation of those still missing is a top priority of his new cabinet. Kishida told reporters he had talked to people close to the issue over the phone on Tuesday. They included the head of a group of abductee family members.
I have taken to heart the relatives' long-standing thoughts on the matter. The government will do everything it can to repatriate all of the abductees as quickly as possible.
帰国に向けて全力で取り組んでいきたいと思っております。
Kishida added he and U.S. President Joe Biden had affirmed their countries would work together on the issue in their phone conversation on Tuesday. The Japanese government says North Korean agents abducted at least 17 Japanese citizens in the 1970s and 80s. 5 were repatriated after a bilateral summit in 2002. The rest remain unaccounted for. NHK has learned a North Korean ship equipped with surface-to-air missiles was spotted earlier this summer in a major fishing area in the Sea of Japan. The incident put Japan's Coast Guard on alert. Sources say the Coast Guard spotted the North Korean government vessel off Ishikawa Prefecture in June. The area is within Japan's exclusive economic zone. The ship's missile system was apparently of the same type as the former Soviet Union's SA-16. That model has an estimated range of 4.5 kilometers. The sources say it's the first time a North Korean ship armed with that kind of missile was seen in the area. In 2001, a North Korean spy ship and a Japan Coast Guard patrol ship exchanged fire in the East China Sea. The North's vessel had been armed with a similar missile system. It exploded and sank. Next, to an update on a political controversy involving former Japanese Prime Minister Abe Shinzo. A prosecution inquest panel says an investigation of his aides should be reopened over an alleged violation of the political funds control law. The issue concerns parties which took place on the eve of government-funded cherry blossom viewing events while Abe was in office. Abe, his former secretary, and a senior staff member of his Tokyo office at that time were accused of breaking the law by not keeping receipts for the parties. They were supposed to have been sent to Abe's political organization. Prosecutors dropped the case in March. The panel announced its decision on Wednesday. Tokyo prosecutors are set to reopen an investigation into Abe's aides. The panel said it was appropriate Abe was not indicted, but it was necessary to investigate why the aides did not send the receipts. Tokyo prosecutors brought a summary indictment last December against Abe's secretary. He was accused of misreporting incoming and outgoing sums totaling about $290,000 related to the parties. Now, a separate inquest panel in July said an earlier decision by prosecutors not to indict Abe for covering part of the event's costs was unjust. Tokyo prosecutors are reinvestigating the case. Now in weather, northern parts of Italy have entered flood season as the water level frequently rises during this time of year. Our meteorologist Jonathan Noe has the details in our World Weather Report.
Hello, it's about time for us to see some flooding taking place in Venice as the high tide season is now taking place. And so I want to show you some video coming out from the city. And you can see there those higher water levels as Venice's popular square partially submerged Tuesday due to the seasonal high water. The water level reached 93 centimeters in the morning, but it was not high enough to activate the flood barrier. So instead, walkways were set up to people crossing without having to get their feet wet. A combination of rising sea levels and unusually high tides caused by climate change has been exacerbating the flood situation in Venice. Now, north from Venice into the central portions of Europe, we've been watching out for these storms associated with a low pressure system nearby. You can tell some of these rain bands are bringing some heavier, more intense rainfall. We'll see that continuing as we go through Wednesday and into Thursday as this low pushes toward the east, and so places like the Balkan Peninsula picking up on that rain as we head toward the latter part of this week. We still have what's left of Sam still rolling through, and that's going to start bringing some of that rain and stronger winds into portions of the United Kingdom, so be on the lookout for that as we go into Thursday. Clouds, high of 19 in London with rain thunderstorms from Rome into Athens as we go through Thursday. Meanwhile, in East Asia, seeing a line of showers developing across China into North Korea, and that's going to be moving toward the east and bringing some more rain into places like North and South Korea. Tokyo seeing A little bit of a cool down. We've been seeing highs in the upper 20s for the past few days, mid-20s as we see a northerly flow with clouds on the increase and maybe even cooler than that. Morning low should be on the cooler side as well. Thunderstorms into Shanghai, showers in Seoul with a high of 23 for Thursday. That's a look at your forecast. Hope you have a good day wherever you are.